So, what if I told you that the very same physics that explains a simple pot of boiling water could also give us a completely new way to look at life itself? Our families, and yeah, even the culture wars we see all over the place. I know, it sounds like a bit of a stretch, right? But today, we're going to dive into this really fascinating framework that connects something as basic as uncertainty to the incredibly complex, layered worlds that we all live in.
Here's how we're going to break this all down. We're going to start with something really simple, the pure, random chance of a coin flip. Then we'll see how just one surprising outcome can actually create the energy needed to build order. From there, we'll look at how life itself gets started, just by drawing a line, a boundary. And then we'll see how that idea scales way up, beyond just single creatures to entire families and cultures. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with a new way to think about the health of our own communities.
Okay, so our journey into all this complexity really has to start with its complete opposite, pure, simple uncertainty. You see, we have to get a handle on the world of what could happen before we can really understand how one specific thing does happen. To get a feel for this, let me just ask you a question. How lucky are you feeling right now? Like, lucky enough to win a 1 in a million lottery? What does that even feel like to be that lucky? Well, a 1 in a million chance is pretty much the same as taking a coin, flipping it 20 times in a row, and having it land on heads every single time. I mean, just try doing that with 3 or 4 flips. You immediately get a gut feeling for just how special, how incredibly unlikely that one specific outcome really is. You know, physics actually has a name for this whole concept of possibility. They call it uncertainty, or what the famous physicist Ludwig Boltzmann called entropy. And it's not as complicated as it sounds. At its heart, it's really just a way of counting up all the possible choices. The more choices there are, the higher the uncertainty. Simple as that. Okay, so we have a way to measure possibility. But so what? How does this huge ocean of what-ifs actually lead to something real? How does that 1 in a million lottery win become more than just a number on a page? So it's really important to pull apart 2 different ideas here. On one hand, you've got the total uncertainty. That's, all 1 million lottery tickets that could be the winner. But then you've got this thing the source calls net surprisal. And that is the powerful jolt of information you get when it turns out your ticket is the winner. It's the gap between everything that could have been and what actually is. And this is the mind-bending part. That net surprisal isn't just a feeling of shock or excitement. In the world of physics, it's a direct measurement of something called thermodynamic availability, which is just a really technical way of saying it's ordered energy that is now available to do real physical work. The surprise itself is a kind of fuel. And this basically creates what you could call the engine of creation. That surprise, that jolt of new information gives you ordered energy. That energy can then perform work. And that work is what actually builds everything, from a simple crystal all the way up to the incredible complexity of life itself. But how does all that energy get focused? I mean, how does a random soup of molecules actually use that available work to become something like a living cell? Well, it all kicks off with the simple act of drawing a line. Let's walk through it. You start with just a disordered mess where everything's pretty much the same no matter where you look. Then, boom, a boundary forms. A cell membrane is the classic example. And all of a sudden, you have a distinct inside and an outside. That simple act of division breaks the sameness, and it creates a brand new thing, a new level of complexity, an entity that can now be acted on by its environment and by natural selection. Now, once you see how a simple boundary can create a new level of life, you start to realize this process doesn't just stop with single cells. No way. It scales up. And this is where things get really, really interesting for us as people. You can think of life as a kind of set of Russian nesting dolls. There's a boundary around a cell, then another one around our tissues, then the skin that makes up an individual organism like you or me. But the source argues it goes even further. There are also boundaries around gene pools, think our families and our species, and even around idea pools, like our cultures and communities. The big idea here is that each of these layers can be seen as its own life form, competing and evolving. This quote makes that abstract idea feel shockingly real. The grizzly bear isn't just acting on its own behalf. In this view, it's acting as a tool for a larger gene pool life form, its own family line, which is competing against other family lines. The bear's individual action is serving the survival of this bigger, invisible thing. And then the source turns this exact same lens on us. It puts out this really provocative idea that people, just like that grizzly bear, can act as agents for an ideal pool life form, a culture, an ideology, a belief system that's in competition with others. It reframes a lot of cultural conflict not just as a disagreement between people, but as a kind of competition between these larger, abstract life forms. So, okay, if we run with this idea, if these gene pools and idea pools are real physical layers of life, then how do we know if they're healthy? How can we tell if our communities and our cultures are thriving or maybe falling apart? This table gives us a really fascinating way to think about it. It maps out 6 key areas of our lives, all based on those 3 big boundaries: our skin, our gene pool, and our idea pool. And for each one, there are things we do looking inward to maintain ourselves and things we do looking outward to engage with others. This pretty much covers everything from hitting the gym to our careers. But here's the kicker. According to the source's research, the average person can only really manage about 4¼ of these 6 layers well at any given time. We literally can't be experts at all of it. So you might be really good at the family and personal wellness stuff, but that can mean you have less bandwidth for, say, your professional network or community politics. But this is the crucial part. That limitation isn't a weakness. It's actually a feature. It is precisely why we need diverse communities and institutions. Our own personal limits are what create the need for us to cooperate. A healthy society depends on having people who specialize across all of these layers, people dedicated to family, people engaged in the community, people who are guardians of culture, and people who are innovators. That diversity is what makes the entire system resilient. And this brings us right to the final, really challenging takeaway from this whole framework. If we really start to see life as something that exists beyond our own skin, if our families, our communities, our cultures are, in a very real sense, living things too, how should that change our priorities? How does it change the way we see our own little part in this much, much bigger picture? It's a powerful way to look at things, and maybe, just maybe, a whole new way of understanding life itself.